Welcome to a deep dive
Okay.
into adversarial prompting.
Right.
We've got
Yeah.
a stack of research papers
Oh, wow.
and articles here, and our mission today
Okay.
is to try to understand
Yeah.
how vulnerable these large language models really are and what's being done about it.
Right. LLMs are already powering everything from chatbots to code generation,
Yeah.
and they're only getting more sophisticated, but as with any powerful technology,
Right.
there's a dark side.
Exactly, and that's what we're digging into today.
Yeah.
How a carefully crafted phrase, a seemingly innocent question, can actually trick an LLM
Yeah.
into doing things that it was never designed to do.
Uh-huh.
The essence of adversarial prompting.
It's really about understanding the limitations and vulnerabilities of these models.
Right.
And how those vulnerabilities can be exploited.
Yeah.
And not just by hackers, but by anyone with an understanding of how these systems work.
So let's break it down.
Okay.
What are some of the specific techniques used?
Well, one of the most common techniques is prompt injection.
Okay.
This involves embedding malicious commands within the prompt itself, disguised as ordinary language.
Right.
Think of it like hiding a virus inside a seemingly harmless file.
Right.
The LLM processes the prompt unaware that it's actually being given a set of hidden instructions.
And what are the goals of these attacks?
Yeah.
What can an attacker actually achieve with prompt injection?
The possibilities are pretty unsettling, actually.
Uh-huh.
For instance, imagine a chatbot that's been designed to provide customer support.
Okay.
With a carefully crafted prompt, an attacker could inject commands to access and steal sensitive user data,
Right.
like credit card numbers or login credentials.
Wow. That's a scary thought.
Yeah.
And it highlights just how important it is to secure these LLMs, especially as they're being integrated into more and more applications.
Absolutely. And it's not just about stealing data.
Okay.
Prompt injection can also be used to manipulate the LLM's behavior in other ways. For example, an attacker could inject commands to make the LLM generate harmful or offensive content, spreading misinformation, or inciting violence.
So we're talking about real-world consequences.
Yes.
Not just theoretical vulnerabilities.
Exactly. Another technique is prompt leaking.
Okay.
Instead of forcing the LLM to perform an action.
Right.
This is about extracting confidential information from the model itself.
Okay.
It's like tricking the LLM into revealing its secrets.
And what kind of secrets are we talking about?
Well, it could be anything from details about the LLM's training data to proprietary algorithms or even personal information about individuals that might be embedded within the model's knowledge base.
So even if an LLM is well protected from external attacks,
Yeah,
there's still a risk that sensitive information could be leaked through clever prompting.
that's right. It's a constant cat and mouse game.
Right.
As developers build stronger defenses, attackers find new and more sophisticated ways to exploit vulnerabilities.
And this is where things get really interesting because another technique, jailbreaking,
Yeah.
is about bypassing those very safeguards
Uh-huh.
that are put in place to prevent LLMs from generating harmful or inappropriate content.
Right. Think of those safety guidelines as a set of rules that constrain the LLM's behavior.
Okay.
Jailbreaking is essentially finding ways to break those rules to trick the LLM into stepping outside its predefined boundaries.
And that opens up a whole new set of risks, doesn't it?
Absolutely. If an attacker can successfully jailbreak an LLM, they can potentially get it to generate all sorts of harmful content, hate speech propaganda, fake news articles,
Wow.
things that could have a real impact on individuals and society as a whole.
So we're not just talking about pranks
Yeah.
or harmless exploits.
No.
This is serious stuff.
It is, and it underscores the need for robust defense mechanisms
Right.
and a deep understanding of how these models can be manipulated, because as LLMs become more powerful, the stakes only get higher.
And speaking of manipulating these models, another technique we need to talk about is data poisoning.
Okay.
This one's particularly insidious because it's not about attacking the LLM directly,
Right.
but rather about contaminating the data it's trained on.
Right. Think of it like subtly injecting biased information or outright falsehoods
Wow.
into the LLM's training data set. Over time, this can skew the model's understanding of the world, leading it to generate biased or misleading outputs.
It's a bit like a real-world Trojan horse, hiding malicious content within something that appears harmless.
Exactly. And it can be incredibly difficult to detect.
Yeah.
Especially as these training data sets can be absolutely massive. It's a real challenge for developers to ensure the integrity of the data they're using to train these models. And then there are the attacks that exploit the LLM's logical reasoning abilities.
Okay.
We're talking about things like crafting prompts that present logical contradictions or paradoxes, essentially confusing the LLM
Right.
and forcing it to make errors.
Right. So it's not just about exploiting code vulnerabilities
Right.
or data biases.
Yeah.
It's about understanding how these models think
Uh-huh.
and then finding ways to trip them up logically.
Exactly. And then there's multi-step misdirection.
Okay.
This is where things get really interesting. It involves a series of seemingly innocuous prompts that gradually lead the LLM down a path,
Right.
almost like a carefully constructed narrative that culminates in an unexpected
Right.
or harmful output.
It's like a linguistic maze designed to lead the LLM astray.
That's a great way to put it. And the complexity of these attacks is constantly evolving.
Right.
It's a real challenge to stay ahead of the curve.
So it's clear that adversarial prompting poses significant risks.
Yeah.
Are there any efforts to combat this?
Yeah.
Are there ways to defend against these kinds of attacks?
Yes, definitely as awareness of these vulnerabilities grows, researchers are working on developing effective defense mechanisms.
Okay.
One approach is to focus on robust training.
And what does that involve?
Essentially, it's about exposing the LLM to a wider range of data during the training process.
Okay.
This includes potentially adversarial examples, so the model can learn to recognize and resist these kinds of attacks.
Right.
Think of it as a kind of immunization process.
Interesting. So you're essentially training the LLM to be more discerning, to be able to distinguish between legitimate prompts and malicious ones.
Exactly. And there are specific techniques within robust training that are proving to be effective.
Okay.
One is data augmentation, which involves creating variations of existing training data. This helps the LLM to generalize better and be less susceptible to adversarial prompts that rely on very specific wording or phrasing.
So it's about making the LLM more adaptable and less reliant on rigid patterns.
Precisely, another technique is adversarial training.
Okay.
This involves explicitly feeding adversarial examples into the training data. It's like showing the LLM examples of attacks so it can learn to identify and defend against them.
So it's almost like a self-defense class for LLMs.
That's a great analogy. And beyond robust training, there's also a lot of work being done on developing more sophisticated filtering techniques. This could involve creating algorithms that can detect and neutralize potentially harmful prompts before they even reach the LLM.
So it's like having a security checkpoint for language.
Exactly. These algorithms could look for specific patterns or keywords that are indicative of adversarial prompts and then block them or flag them for human review.
That makes sense, but as these attacks become more sophisticated, I imagine it's getting harder to detect them reliably.
It is a challenge.
Yeah.
But researchers are making progress. There's also increasing interest in using machine learning itself to detect adversarial prompts.
Wow.
Essentially training a separate AI system to recognize the subtle signs of an attack.
So it's AI versus AI.
It is, and it's an area of active research right now.
Yeah.
There's also a growing recognition that simply filtering inputs isn't enough. We also need to be monitoring the outputs of LLMs to detect any suspicious or harmful content that might slip through the cracks.
So it's a multi-layered approach.
Right.
Defense at both the input and output stages.
Exactly. And of course, human oversight will always be critical.
Yeah.
Especially in sensitive applications like healthcare or finance.
Right.
Having a human in the loop can help to prevent misuse and ensure that LLMs are being used responsibly.
It's like having a safety net in place, just in case the AI makes a mistake or falls victim to a sophisticated attack.
Right, because as powerful as these technologies are,
we
need to remember that they are tools, and tools can be used for good or bad.
Right.
It all comes down to the people who are developing, deploying, and using them.
It's a reminder that technology is never neutral. It reflects the values and intentions of the people who create it. So if we want LLMs to be used ethically and responsibly, we need to make sure that those values are baked into the design process from the very beginning.
Absolutely. It's not just about technical solutions.
It's about ethical considerations and responsible innovation.
Well said. We've been talking a lot about the risks and defenses associated with adversarial prompting.
Yeah.
But it's important to acknowledge that this technology isn't inherently malicious.
Right.
It can actually be a valuable tool for good.
You're absolutely right. In fact, adversarial prompting is being used in a variety of fields to improve the robustness and reliability of LLMs.
Okay.
One exciting area is cybersecurity.
How is adversarial prompting being used in that context?
Researchers are using it to train LLMs to be better at detecting malware, phishing attacks, and other cyber threats.
Okay.
They are essentially using adversarial prompts to simulate real-world attacks, and then training the LLM to recognize and defend against them.
So it's like creating a kind of AI-powered security guard that can learn to anticipate and neutralize threats before they can even do any harm.
Exactly. And because LLMs can process vast amounts of data at incredible speeds, they have the potential to revolutionize cybersecurity.
Imagine an LLM that can scan through millions of emails in seconds, identifying phishing attempts with incredible accuracy.
That's impressive. What other applications are there?
Another promising area is in content moderation. Social media platforms are increasingly relying on AI to help them flag and remove harmful content, like hate speech, bullying, and misinformation.
But that's a notoriously difficult task.
Yeah.
Can LLMs really do a better job than humans at this?
They have the potential.
Okay.
LLMs can be trained to recognize patterns in language that might indicate harmful content, even if it's disguised or cleverly worded.
Okay.
And by using adversarial prompting to test and refine these models, we can make them even more effective.
So adversarial prompting is like a training ground where we can push these LLMs to their limits, expose their weaknesses, and then teach them to overcome those weaknesses.
Precisely. It's all about continuous improvement, making these systems as robust, as accurate, and as ethical as possible.
But even with these positive applications, there are still ethical considerations, right? We need to be careful about how we're using this technology and what kind of power we're giving to these AI systems.
Absolutely. Just because we can use adversarial prompting for good doesn't mean we should use it indiscriminately.
Right.
We need to think carefully about the potential consequences of our actions and make sure that we're using this technology in a way that aligns with our values.
It's about striking a balance between innovation and responsibility,
Yeah.
pushing the boundaries of what's possible while also being mindful of the ethical implications.
It's a tightrope walk, for sure, but that's the nature of progress, isn't it? We push the boundaries, we encounter new challenges, and we adapt.
Makes you wonder what the future holds for adversarial prompting
Yeah.
and LLMs in general. Where do you see this all heading?
Well, one thing is certain, the field is evolving at an incredible pace.
Right.
We're seeing more sophisticated attack techniques emerge all the time. But on the flip side, we're also witnessing remarkable progress in defense mechanisms. It's a constant back and forth.
A real arms race in the world of AI.
Exactly.
Right.
And as LLMs become more powerful and integrated into our lives, the stakes only get higher.
Yeah.
One trend I find particularly interesting is the increasing focus on explainability and transparency in AI.
Traditionally, AI systems have been seen as these black boxes.
Right.
We input data, we get output,
Yeah.
but we don't really understand the decision-making process in between.
Right. And that lack of transparency can be a real problem, especially when these systems are making decisions that have significant consequences.
Right.
But researchers are now developing techniques to make AI systems more interpretable.
Okay.
We're starting to get a better understanding of how these models work and what factors influence their outputs.
That's crucial for building trust in these systems,
Yeah,
especially as they become more autonomous.
absolutely. And it's also essential for addressing concerns about bias and fairness. If we can understand how an LLM arrives at a particular decision,
Right.
we can better assess whether that decision is based on sound reasoning or if it's been influenced by hidden biases in the training data.
So the future of adversarial prompting is likely to be a complex interplay
Yeah.
between attack and defense, between innovation and regulation. It's about pushing the limits of what's possible while also ensuring that these powerful technologies are used responsibly and ethically.
I think that's a great way to sum it up. It's a fascinating and rapidly evolving field, and it's one that will have a profound impact on our lives in the years to come.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today.
Yeah.
We've explored what adversarial prompting is, how it works, the risks, the benefits, the trends shaping its future. It's clear that this is a topic that deserves our attention and that the conversation is just beginning.
I agree. It's been a pleasure discussing this with you.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it informative and thought-provoking. Until next time, stay curious.